Have you ever stopped to reflect on the struggle between human power and divine authority? Psalm 2 is a true poetic masterpiece that addresses this very issue, delivering a message of warning and hope to all nations and rulers. Today, we're going to dive into this extraordinary psalm, exploring the historical and spiritual context that inspired it and how it applies to our lives today. This psalm is considered a royal psalm, likely used in coronation ceremonies for the kings of Israel. It portrays the vision of an anointed king as God's representative on earth, confronting the rebellion of peoples against divine rule. Let's discover how these words resonate even now, offering us an invitation to reflect and recognize God's sovereignty. Why do the nations conspire, and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth rise up, and the rulers band together against the Lord and his anointed, saying, "Let us break their chains and throw off their shackles." The one enthroned in heaven laughs. The Lord scoffs at them. He rebukes them in his anger and terrifies them in his wrath, saying, "I have installed my king on Zion, my holy mountain. I will proclaim the Lord's decree. He said to me, 'You are my son. Today I have become your father. Ask me, and I will make the nations your inheritance, the ends of the earth your possession. You will break them with a rod of iron. You will dash them to pieces like pottery. Therefore, you kings, be wise. Be warned, you rulers of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear and celebrate his rule with trembling. Kiss the Son, or he will be angry, and your way will lead to your destruction, for his wrath can flare up in a moment. Blessed are all who take refuge in him." Verses 1 to 3, the rebellion of nations. Why do the nations conspire, and the peoples plot in vain? This is how Psalm 2 begins, with a rhetorical question confronting us with human rebellion. Nations, symbolized by their leaders, plot against the Lord and his anointed. Here, we see humanity's tendency to resist divine rule, favoring their own paths and power. Historically, this likely referred to neighboring peoples opposing Israel's rule and the role of the anointed king. Today, however, we can broaden this interpretation, seeing in these verses a reflection of forces that reject God's values of justice and truth, seeking independence from his authority. Verses 4 to 6, God's response. The one enthroned in heaven laughs. The Lord scoffs at them. God's response to rebellion is majestic and powerful. He is not threatened by human schemes. He laughs, expressing his supreme authority. The next verse reinforces his power, proclaiming that he has established his king on Zion, his sacred mountain. In the biblical context, this king was likely a historical figure, such as David or one of his descendants. However, Christians see this as a foreshadowing of Jesus Christ, the Messianic King. This message of divine sovereignty reminds us that despite humanity's apparent victories in rebellion, God remains in control, establishing his will in due time. Verses 7 to 9, the divine decree. You are my son. Today I have become your father. This declaration is central to Psalm 2, highlighting the intimate relationship between God and his anointed. In its original context, this verse celebrated the king as God's adopted son, a common idea in royal coronations. In the New Testament, this text is directly applied to Jesus, revealing him as the eternal and true Son of God. Additionally, the psalm announces the king's authority over nations, with the promise of breaking those who oppose him with a rod of iron. This imagery might seem harsh, but points to divine justice that will ultimately prevail over all evil. Verses 10 to 12, an invitation to wisdom. In the final verses, the psalmist makes a direct appeal to rulers. Therefore, you kings, be wise. Be warned, you rulers of the earth. Here, we see an invitation to humility and submission to divine authority. This call is not only for ancient leaders, but for all of us, urging us to revere God and embrace his justice. The psalm ends on a hopeful note. Blessed are all who take refuge in him. Despite the warnings and tone of judgment, Psalm 2 offers salvation to those who submit to the Lord, recognizing him as a refuge and source of true peace. Psalm 2 is more than an ancient text. It is a living message that resonates in our hearts and minds. It challenges us to reflect on where we place our trust and how we respond to divine authority in our lives. May we learn from these words and find refuge in God's sovereignty and love. After all, as the final verse reminds us, blessed are all who take refuge in him. Where do you place your trust? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more reflections on Scripture. See you in the next video.